6, a helping hand with your land.
Neil from Essex here. We're out in the lot today with the Kubota L4554 front hitch for the Kubota Grand L60 series tractors. There's a couple variations of these hitches. There's an automatic hitch, which is the one we have here today with Kubota's auto hitch system on it, and also a manual one. Going through and installing these things is intimidating when you stand here and look at it. This is a complicated piece. There's a lot going on. But trust me, if you looked at these hitches from years ago, a lot of wrenches were typically involved, bolts to put subframes on, and Kubota has done a lot to make this thing vastly easier to put on than what old hitches have been in years gone by. So come along with us here today. We're going to show you the couple of steps that it takes in order to install this hitch on a tractor. So first, on the hitch itself, Kubota has taken a lot of steps in order to make this thing easy for a dealership to install. A lot of times when we get into things like this, we can really start to sink a lot of time into putting on completing kits and that kind of stuff that really drive up the price of these things. This hitch, though, comes to us basically ready to go. You'll see the hitch itself. Starting here from the back, the hitch is going to go into the rear drawbar of the tractor to be supported by the rear. There's 2 pins here in the middle that are going to support at the middle of the tractor, and then 2 large pins up here at the front where it's going to hang off the front of your machine. For the PTO on this, you're going to put a mid-PTO cassette into your tractor if you're going to be using any front implements that require the PTO. So the snowblower, the front broom, or the flail mower, those are all going to drive off this mid-PTO shaft and a couple carrier bearings here to get power up to the front. Looking here along the side, you're going to see that I've got a handful of hydraulic hoses in order to operate the hydraulic functions, and also an electrical connector here as well. You can have a lot of functions happening here on the front of these auto hitches. So with all the moving pieces that are here in the front, we can actually put this hitch onto the tractor, drive into this front blade or drive into a snowblower, and automatically have this thing come together and hook up all of your hydraulics, your PTO shafts on the fly. Everything can be done from the cab. In order to accomplish that, we've got to hook up all these hoses and the electrical functions so that everything is working back there in the cab to enable all of those things. So you have a handful of things here to plug on once you've physically attached this thing to the tractor. As far as serviceability goes, with this thing removed, everything is really easy to get to. There's a handful of grease zerks back here in the mid-PTO for the carrier bearings and the shafting that goes through here. Couplers that you're going to need to make sure are good and snug, or might need an O-ring replaced on periodically. So nothing that's really buried. Electrically too, we've got a bunch of magnetic sensors and switches and stuff to make sure that things work properly when we go through the auto hitch process. And most of those things are all very exposed with good heavy duty connectors. So if you happen to catch or break something down here, it should be something that's fairly easy to resolve if you need to. So the very first thing we're going to do is pull the tractor over top of the subframe. Now, this is pretty difficult to eyeball from the cab how far you want to go, but really the important thing is that you get far enough on top of the thing that you're able to hook the hydraulic hoses up. So once we're over top of the subframe, we're going to grab our bundle of hydraulic hoses here. You're going to notice when you look at each one of these, they're color-coded so that you know what coupler to put them on. So green to green, yellow to yellow, and you're just going to follow your way around here with all 5 of these to hook them back in again. You'll notice when you're plugging these in, there's a black retaining bracket back here against the subframe. The easiest way to do these is to loop them around the bracket before you plug them in. The 4 hoses that are on here are ones you're probably used to seeing. You know, if you go put your loader on or other attachments, they're going to operate cylinders. But there's a 5th one on here that you may not be used to. This 5th one is a simple drain that can go back to tank, so when you throw the thing in the float or drop it down to the ground, it's able just to dump that fluid back into the tractor's tank in the rear. If you have the Auto Connect version of the hitch, after you've hooked up your hydraulic hoses, you have a 6-pin electrical connector down here as well to hook up. That electrical connector's kept in this weatherproof housing right here to keep the weather off of it. You simply pull it out of its housing and then close it back into the mating side over on the tractor. Now before raising this back up again, you want to go and reattach your PTO shaft. With the subframe lowered down here, you have a lot more room to work. You could conceivably try to do this a little bit later here in the process, but at this point with the subframe down, I've got more room to be able to get down here and reattach the PTO shaft. If you've ever done a PTO before, you pull back the locking collar, wiggle this thing front until it goes over top, and then this should bounce forward. Once it does that, make sure you grab the shaft and pull it back and make sure it's locked in place. The last thing you want to happen is for this thing to come off while it's spinning. So just give it a good jiggle here once this thing locks to make sure it's in place. Once you've done that, we're going to take the tractor, start it up here, and hydraulically raise up the back part of the subframe here so that we can slide the drawbar back into it to support the rear end of it. So there's a sweet spot right back in here where you're going to find that the hitch, the drawbar, is able to slide back into the hitch itself. Once you've slid it in there, just take the pin and drop it down in through the hole to keep it from coming out. So once we've got the back end of this thing supported, the next step that you're going to do is to use the hydraulics of the hitch to raise it up in so that you can put these two large pins in here in the front. You'll see the front of this hitch here is flared out a little bit here at the bottom. That's to guide this piece in when it lifts up so that you don't have to be dead square on top of it. So there's a little bit of wiggle room here that allows this thing to line up. Once you've got it up in here, you're actually going to use it to lift the front tires of your tractor up in the air, and that's going to force these pins to line up perfectly so you can slide the pins back in to retain it. Once you've raised that up and picked the tractor up here off the ground, you can see I could take these two monster pins right here and slide them into these holes in order to retain the front of this. When you're working on level ground here and you have the tractor picked up in the air, everything is forced into alignment that should allow you to slide these guys right in. Back underneath your loader mounts, there's two smaller holes for these small pins as well that support the middle of the subframe. So line these guys up, slide them in, and then put in their retaining clips. If you've ever done this kind of stuff before, you'll know that there's sometimes a bit of a sweet spot where things need to be. If you're pushing these pins in and they don't line up perfectly the first time, simply drop down the weight off the tractor a little bit, and eventually you're going to find they line right up and you can slide them in. So our final step before we go to work is to flip up our parking stand. Now there's a small stand down here on the bottom that supports this thing and allows it to pivot back and forth during the installation process. You take the pin here, pull it out, rotate it up and drop the pin back in the hole again, and the parking stand swings up and out of the way. So that's the installation process for the L4554 quick hitch. If you've done one of these things before, this is a lot easier than the older hitches that have been on the older series tractors. Kubota's really done a lot to make this a slick, toolless process that doesn't require a whole lot of screwing around. If you're interested in this, we've done some other videos as well on the front attachments themselves, the snowblower and the blade that we have here that we go into a little bit more depth on the process of taking them on and off and showing you some of the features of those implements. So you can check out that video later as well. If you're in the market for a piece like this or you have any parts or service needs we can help you with, give us a call at Messick's. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at messick's.com.